I always thought a person would have to do something truly awful to be disinherited. But here I am 60 years old, with a dead father, a thieving brother who just got a house for free, and a check for exactly nothing. The question that keeps me awake at night isn't about the money. It's this: was my father's love always just a transaction, and I was the only one who didn't know the price? I need to start by telling you about the holiday dinner. 8 years ago, Thanksgiving. My father was in his late 80s, still sharp, still cruel in that quiet way. ID kept him at arm's length for decades. Low contact. They call it no, but holidays were my obligation. So I roasted a chicken, set the table with the good napkins, and let him sit in my living room afterward, sipping the whiskey my husband poured. My brother was there too. Had been living in our father's basement for years. Rent-free, of course. That's just how it worked. My brother, let's call him what my father called him, your idiot brother. YIB for short. He has the same job I do, makes about the same money, but he's never had a dime to his name. I used to wonder where it all went. Then I stopped wondering because I knew. That night, my father sat forward on my couch, cleared his throat, and said, "I have an idea about my will, what I want to do with the house." The fire crackled behind him, the glow making his wrinkles look like cracks in dried mud. I said, "Okay." He told me he wanted to leave the house to both of us, me and YIB, but he wanted YIB to continue living there. Then he added, with this little smile, "This way you own the house, and you won't have to clean it out or sell it or anything after I'm gone. And since YIB can't afford this, you can pay the taxes on it." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. There was no punchline. He meant it. He wanted me to be his son's landlord and piggy bank forever, and he was presenting it like a gift. Here's what you need to understand about my brother. He's not disabled. He's never been disabled. He's just empty. When we were kids, he'd steal cash from my dresser and my parents would say, "Hell, grow out of it." He never did. When my father got older, my brother started taking his social security checks. He'd drain my father's bank account, wipe it clean. There were times I had to buy groceries for my parents because my brother had taken every last dollar. My mother once called me in tears because she couldn't afford her blood pressure medication. I paid for that too. And then, after my mother died, my brother stole my grandfather's collection of silver dimes, just walked out with them. Nobody said a word. So when my father sat on my couch and told me I'd be financially responsible for this man for the rest of his life, I didn't say, "Let me think about it." I said, "Absolutely not." My father blinked. "Then what is YIB going to do?" I said, "He's going to have to come up with a different plan before then." The room went quiet. My husband was in the kitchen. I could hear him rinsing dishes and my kids were upstairs. Just me and my father and the fire. He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he'd suspected for a long time. I thought maybe that was the end of it. But then something changed. Within weeks, my father had rewritten his will, changed the title on his house to transfer in death to my brother alone, and removed my name from everything: the will, the life insurance, every document that bore my name. I found out through a letter from his lawyer. No phone call, no explanation, just a form letter that said, "Please be advised that the decedent's estate plan has been updated." I sat at my kitchen table, same table, where ID served him Thanksgiving dinner, and read those words over and over. I wasn't angry at first. I was confused. I went back through the conversation in my head, trying to find the moment I'd been cruel or unreasonable. But I hadn't been. ID just said no. ID refused to be his son's keeper. For that, I was erased. I didn't speak to him after that. Not out of spite, but because what was there to say? Had made his position clear. I was useful to him only as an insurance policy for his favorite child. The moment I declined the role, I ceased to exist. And then, last month, he died, 94 years old, alone in a hospital bed, from what I heard. I didn't go. I told myself it was because I didn't want to see YIB swaggering around like he'd won something. But the truth is, I didn't go because I was afraid of what I'd feel. And I was right to be afraid. The reading of the will was in a small conference room. I sat across from my brother. He wore a new leather jacket probably bought with the last check. My father wrote. The lawyer read out the house to my brother. 100%. Small percentages to each grandchild. Nothing to me. Not a token. Not a memento. Not even a line acknowledging I existed. My brother was furious. He slammed his hand on the table. She gets nothing, fine, but why did he give anything to her kids? That's my money. The lawyer had to explain to him calmly that the grandchildren's shares were a small fraction of the estate, but my brother's face was already turning red. He wasn't listening. He was doing the math in his head, calculating what Head lost, even though Head just gained a paid-off house. I sat there watching him, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not sadness, not anger. It was a kind of hollow recognition. My father's love had always been conditional. This was just the final, most brutal condition. You will support your brother, or you will get nothing. Not even a goodbye. My daughter, she's 25. She took my hand under the table. She's getting a small share enough to help buy a used car. She told me she'd trade it in a second to have her grandfather be a decent man. I told her to keep the money. We need something good to come out of this. That night, my kids and I sat in my living room, same room where it all started. We made bets. How long until the house is gone? How long until YIB blows through the cash? My son said 2 years. My daughter said 18 months. I said 6. I've seen how fast he burns through money when there's no one to stop him. Here's the thing nobody tells you about being disinherited: it's not about the money. I'm fortunate. I have a job, a roof, a family that doesn't see me as a walking ATM. But there's a specific kind of grief that comes from realizing your parent saw you only as a tool, that your value to them was measured in what you could do for the sibling they actually loved. And the worst part is, I'll never know if my father felt a flicker of regret before he died. I'll never know if he looked at that will and thought, maybe I went too far, because he's gone. And the silence he left behind is louder than any conversation we ever had. My brother will lose that house. He'll lose the money. He'll show up at my door someday. I know he will, with that same empty look and a story about how he's down on his luck. And I'll have to decide, again, whether to say yes or no. But this time, there's no inheritance to dangle over my head. There's no father to disapprove. It's just me and my front door, and a man who spent 60 years proving hell never change. I already know what I'll say. The same thing I said 8 years ago, on Thanksgiving, while the fire crackled and my father smiled like he'd given me a gift. Absolutely not.
Hello, I'm Dr. Julian Reed. Let us begin with the cold mathematics of family trauma. What you've described is not merely a dispute over assets, it is a classic case of parental triangulation weaponized through a will. The psychological pattern at work is what I call conditional legacy as a control mechanism. Your father did not disinherit you out of anger alone. He restructured his estate to punish you for refusing to become your brother's perpetual caretaker. This is a variant of prodigal son syndrome. Inverted, the irresponsible child is elevated, while the responsible one is cast out for the sin of setting boundaries. Your father's demand that you pay taxes on a house you would not fully own, while allowing your brother to live there rent-free, was not a request. It was a test of obedience, and when you refused, he revealed the transaction at the heart of his affection. Your value to him was measured by your utility as a safety net for your brother. The speed with which he removed you from the will, the life insurance, and the house title speaks to a long-held resentment, likely decades of your brother's theft and irresponsibility, that your father enabled, and then projected onto you as the cold one for refusing to participate in the delusion. I want to validate your pain with clinical precision. The spike you describe, a realization that your father's love was conditionalities, not greed or entitlement. It is identity grief. You spent 60 years believing that responsibility would be rewarded, that fairness was a family value. Instead, you learned that your father's final act was to say your brother's comfort matters more than your dignity. That wound is not about money. It is about the death of a core illusion that you mattered as a daughter, not just as a caregiver. And yet, here is the darkly compassionate truth: your refusal to enable your brother was an act of psychological health. You preserved your own financial security and refused to inherit a role that of his warden that would have consumed you. Your father's disinheritance was a gift in grotesque wrapping. It freed you from a lifetime of cleaning up your brother's messes. He is now alone with the house, the anger, and his own incompetence. Your children will buy a used car. They will learn that boundaries have a cost, but so does enmeshment. Now, the moral ambiguity your story demands. Is a parent justified in disinheriting a responsible child for refusing to bankroll an irresponsible sibling? Some would say a parent has absolute right to distribute assets as they wish. Others would argue that such a demand constitutes emotional extortion, an unfair burden that punishes competence and rewards failure. So I leave you with this question. And I pose it to anyone listening: if your parent asked you to sacrifice your financial future to enable a sibling who has stolen from you, would saying no make you unloving, or would it make you sane? Comment below. Let me hear your cold calculus.